Welcome to Lights Camera Author. I'm Jim Junot, and if you like what you're seeing, please hit subscribe and ring the bell to be alerted for the latest shows. So let's get right to this. According to Blood Moon's president, Danforth Prince, it's the best feature-length compendium of Hollywood gossip ever compiled, lavishly illustrated and loaded with examples of the PR hurricanes generated by the false gods of fame, physical beauty, lust, greed, narcissism, and exhibitionism. This book, Hollywood Babylon, might not be everybody's fantasy about what they really want to crawl into bed with, but as a publishing phenomenon, it's the very best of its genre.
The Spartacus was made, I think, in '57, I think. Oh, I could review that fast. And it was indeed a story about a slave revolt, the Thracian slave called Spartacus, who entered the annals of art history because in the 19th century, many French and German sculptors viewed him as a hero, a voice against oppression. And they sculpted him and they painted him, and Spartacus is more a legend, partly a historic figure. And so Hollywood decided to make the tale of Spartacus a slave uprising, a gladiator in the ring, a slave and enslaved from child, became a gladiator, killed his oppressors, led a slave revolt, and was crucified in agony along a highway, along with like lots of his followers. I don't remember the figure. 10,000 members of his revolt were crucified beside the Appian Way in ancient Rome. So there are stories here. But as it applies to this book we've done, Hollywood Babylon with Detours to Gomorrah, it writes about the somersaults that film producers had to do in 1957, if I've got the year right, to portray the lush decadence of the final years of the Roman Empire. And somersaults, indeed, they had to do. And we found it amusing how the film came out at the end, how all kinds of sexual things were repressed, particularly the gay and lesbian sexual aspects of life in the Roman Empire. God knows what was going on now. So the story, chapter 1 of this new book of ours, is indeed explaining how they got around all that, handled the censors of the 1950s, yet did something more or less akin to emulating the Roman Empire and its homosexual, omnisexual, sexual perversions in a film that would be approved by the Hays Commission, and no easy feat it was. Bang.
And finally tonight, Mae West, Hollywood's most enduring sex symbol, died today. Ms. West, who made countless movies during her long career, died at her home. She was 88 years old.
Well, she was in a play on Broadway, and again, I'm bad with these years, 1925-ish, and it was called Sex, S-E-X, if I remember correctly, and it was like the talk of Broadway, and it was Risque from Hell, and it was rated by the police 7 or 8 times, and it helped to develop Mae into the saucy tosspot that we all love her for being. Now, are we making fun of wonderful Mae West? No, we are marveling at how gracefully she managed to cope with the censorship standards of her age, have the fortitude to continue with these jokes that she made so off color, Little Chickadee, W.C. Fields. Oh, well, we admire and love Mae West and recognize what an eccentric she was. So the book is loaded with anecdotes about Miss Mae. And if I might say, Salvador Dali, the great surrealist sculptor and painter, designed a sofa in the 50s, and it was emulated and inspired by Mae West's lips. It was a curvaceous sofa that looked like a pair of lips, big, pink, and it was marketed all over the world as, and then the life preserver. During World War II, Cary Grant had to wear, when he did something military, he had to wear a Mae West, which is a life preserver, big boobs that keep you afloat in the water. So her contribution to the American gossip landscape is huge, and we love Mae, and it's all there. I don't think I want to recreate the whole 50 anecdotes we have about her, but all of them are saucy.
Yeah, and she was
and demented, if you like. Toward the end of her life, there was a
Joan Crawford, who rose from a chorus girl to one of the top stars of the golden age of movies, died today of a heart attack at her Manhattan home.
Her blue movie period, blue movies, Joan. And
yeah, they went through a lot of trouble hiding that, didn't they?
Well, I think the standards of nudity have been so relaxed in the 80s, since the 1980s, that there's nude pictures of many celebrities out there. Many of them are on the web, some of them are on the dark web, and in 1926-ish, when these nude photos were circulated about Joan Crawford, She was indeed to pay the bills, nice actress, not getting a lot of roles, new, young, horrible childhood. I think the story, she was raped by her brother, if I remember correctly. Horrible, horrible. Yes, there were clips from blue movies she did, and all the Hollywood gossips grabbed the copies as fast as they could and put them in their scrapbooks and put them at the bottom of their files. And today Darwin Porter is my co-author, very brilliant archivist of the American entertainment scene, happened to pull out of his files, yes, some of the nude photos of Joan Crawford, yes, indeed. And we don't point our fingers like bad Joan. Oh, how could she? We don't do that. We don't. We sort of admire people who survived the casting couch a couple of times. If I might say, we're marketing this book as a kind of hipster to hipster gift that a hipster would give another hipster who has already survived the casting couch. As the best does have.
And the book is, yeah, and it looks like you had a lot of fun, and you look like you have a lot of fun doing all your books, but this one, you really, you have a lot of fun relating these stories.
We do. They're great fun. We're fascinated by the way people react. Some of them are left completely numb. We're not writing Marcel Proust again. And these gossip guides are indeed a genre. And I think in their way, they're the best of their genre. But if it's not your cup of tea, it's not for you. But there has always been ambivalence and ambiguity about sexuality in Hollywood, and we are just coming up with a story or two to trace the happy development of American censorship and morals at large. So the book is very revelatory. It has some stories in the 20s, and it moves through the Hollywood experience to stories in the 80s and 90s and 21st century. And there's a story on Salma Hayek. Which is I love Salma Hayek. She was in Frida, I think. Yeah, that brilliant thing she did. But there was a lot of people knew these stories for the brief period when they were raging. Let's say for a month in 1976. Let's say 85-ish, and then they were completely forgotten. But this book sort of takes what was really important for a brief period in the American timetable and reminds us of, I don't want to say how far we've come, but how the world has changed, and indeed it has changed in blah, blah, big ways. Fascinating. There's nothing like America. America is a trip. America's history. America's cultural history is absolutely fascinating.
Never had that.
Just wanted to get into show business, and I didn't know what show business was. I thought it was vaudeville. The only thing that I ever made even the audition for was as a showgirl. But I couldn't keep the job as a showgirl. So finally I said, I have to eat, so I'm going to become a model. And I got a job as a model. I became a good model. And I went from 7th Avenue to wherever Hattie Carnegie was. I can't remember the street now. And some other places. And then I did fashion shows. And then I also did, modeling for artists who did the big 24 sheets.
Nude?
No!
Lucille Ball is astonishing as a showbiz entrepreneur. I mean, she handled it well. She made television happen and invented the sitcom, and we love her, an American icon. Oh, wow. But by the time she got around to doing that, she was the veteran of, the 20s. She was modeling. She was doing stuff in the 20s. She was virtually topless in an early movie, Busby Berkeley-style choreography, and she was a Roman slave. And I don't want to be flippant. And a lot of actresses will turn a trick from time to time. And how nice when the transaction is discreet and there's money in an envelope and nobody talks about it at the time. How lovely it was indeed that way. Very elegant, very discreet. And yes, she would be hauled out by the local Hollywood people whenever money guys came in from New York, and she would indeed be lovely and graceful and redheaded or blonde, whatever she was at the time. And to be available for entertainment purposes. And it was a rough time. It was a depression. She had to pay the bills. Who am I to point fingers at anyone? So I think that it is astonishing that A, she did it, B, that her career evolved finally into the I Love Lucy that everyone remembers, Lucy Ricardo in a small apartment in New York with a Cuban husband. Even that was radical for the time. And it was a trip from hell. So this is illuminatory of an American situation that wouldn't exist in any other culture in the planet. And we've documented, as it happens, we also published a 2-volume, very complete history of the career of Lucille Ball, volumes 1 and volume 2. So my point is that this exists also in our backlist in very significant major book form. I think each of the 2 books is like, is it 400, 500 pages each, big deals. And why do we document it? Because we think it's illuminatory about the American experience. And yes, so for this particular book, we published a mini biography of her, and we did it in 25 pages and compressed all of the stuff that was in those other 2 volumes. Yes, so we have handled Lucille Ball in big formats and in a smaller format called this one. And yes, the tales are lush and rich and filled with gossip from hell. She was like one of those hit people the universe has ever seen, and great with media, and cynical and smart, with a rather acid tongue, and a long, long history of romantic liaisons with guys who became famous too. Yes, so we put it in this book. Yes, it's a chapter in itself. Yes.
We are very sad to report breaking news right now. Nancy Reagan, the former First Lady of the United States, has passed away.
So in the book we're talking about that I just released, Hollywood Babylon with Detours to Gomorrah, is indeed a biography of the sexual history of Ronald Reagan and a story about his divorce from Jane Wyman. And okay, blah, blah, blah. Let me just say that as part of the research of this, we, my co-author Darwin Porter and I, traveled to the Reagan Museum in Simi, California, Simi Valley, California. And I approached my visit to a presidential library with great interest, a great reverence. I do. And you would go into that museum, and it was as if there had never been a first wife. Nancy got a hold of the collections, and she obliterated any reference to Jane Wyman, her predecessor, Ronald Reagan's first wife. Well, that's interesting. I said, huh? Okay, so there seems to be something afloat in the world about concealing all the details of Ronald Reagan's previous sexual history as a horn dog, as an actor in Hollywood, where people fuck around a lot. They do. It's reinforcement for the acting profession. You know, you're insecure. Do you love me? Am I good looking? A night of romance, proof you love me. All the stuff that goes on in the heart of the human soul. Blah blah. So yes, and he had an active dating life. Many B actresses. Lola Albright comes to mind, and she was a bathing beauty who looked fabulous in a white bathing suit on Santa Monica Beach, and they had a long affair. And I don't care if he had an affair with Lola Albright, but my point is that it's so rigorously opposed by everyone that you never, bringing it out to the public is considered something of a radical act.
Oh, Selena Walters.
Oh
my.
And about 19 others. And so we documented them with photographs and contemporary, blah, blah, blah about it at the time and what everybody said and what the women said, and we put this all out in the book. Now, for the record, we had also, prior to putting out this new book you're talking about, Hollywood Babylon with Detours to Gomorrah, we had published a 500-600 page biography of Ronald Reagan. We had done it in a big book form, and that is out there, and it won some book awards, and how grateful I am to the judges, blah, blah, blah. But for the purposes of I've got to be careful here, a reading public for whom ADD is an increasing problem, book sales are not robust, people aren't reading, people can't read, ADD, everybody's on Adderall. I live in New York, like with you are. It is hard to sell a book these days to a reading population which is basically collapsed. So my loud point is, we are not surprised that the buying public would avoid a 500 or 600 page biography of Ronald Reagan with the scandals that didn't get published. We thought it would be more palatable to condense this into a shorter format. So yes, within the book that we're talking about just released, Hollywood Babylon with Detours to Gomorrah is a rundown on the Ronald Reagan marriage number 2, followed by, marriage number 1, followed by marriage number 2. And
there was that one actress, though. I mean, this was a story which they have tried to bury deep.
Oh, yes.
It was called Gipper the Ripper. Because he basically raped a person, raped a woman. Well,
she said that, yeah. She went to court and she did it, and the reporters asked him as he went in and out of church with Nancy, and they said, "Did you rape?" I think it was Selma. Who was it again?
Selena Walters.
Selena something.
Yeah.
And they yelled at him as he was going to church. And what about that rape? And he said, what? He said, what about that rape?
Can't hear you.
What?
Can't hear you.
And then Nancy dragged him into the church, and the story was over. So there's a lot out there. I'm friendly with the owner of a bookstore in Palm Springs, California, like very hip place. A lot of people who have been brutalized by showbiz retire to Palm Springs. A lot of gay guys and a lot of old dragon movie stars, female, who are out there in the Palm Springs hills. So my point is, when we released that biography of Ronald Reagan, I called my friend, his name was Doug Martin. He owns a bookstore, and I said, Ronald Reagan, we have a book on Ronald Reagan. He said, I've called everybody I know out in Palm Springs, and I said, this hot new book. And he said that they all said to me, says Doug, about the calls he made, and we don't want to hear about Ronald Reagan. He's boring. He's stuffy. It isn't interesting to us. Don't talk to me about Ronald Reagan. We're just glad he's gone. Say the readers. So if we have a thankless job of getting out these stories, so be it. And it's great fun to talk to you in this lovely way, and how kind you are to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ava, and before we run out of time here, I want to talk a little bit about Ava Gardner, one of my favorites. She was, she was one of my favorite old-time movie actors.
Oh God,
actresses.
Ava Gardner. I would like to have had a cocktail or two with the aged, seen everything, done everyone, Ava Gardner. I would love it. Listen, I follow these old broads. They're wonderful. They're wonderful.
Yeah,
they're fascinating.
And they had their own. They were modern in their beliefs.
Yes,
even though it was covered up.
and again, part of the charm and the artwork is how it was covered up. I had a response to a friend of mine, Mike. I give out copies of all our books to people for Christmas presents. I don't know what. And this particular Hollywood Babylon thing is I've given it out to friends and family members as a love gift at Christmas and an amusing conversation piece. Okay, so and one of them came back to me, Mike, my friend, and he said, the book is too phallic. He said, whatever that, the book is too phallic. He said. Okay, so I thought about that for about a week, and I said to myself, well, we are revealing scandals in Hollywood, yes, and we are writing in a climate where the great heterosexual scandals many of them have been covered. How many times can you write about Jane Mansfield? A lot of people know about Jane Mansfield. So my point is, what is new and has been suppressed is the gay and lesbian scandals of the Hollywood experience going back to 1920. And indeed, our book contains scandals, many of which are derived from homosexual activity within classic Hollywood. But my point is, that's all that's left. These are the other things that haven't been published before. And if this book is too phallic, what's wrong with you? Yes, it is too phallic. It's very phallic. There's a lot of gay stuff. There's a lot of nude shots of guys. Yul Brynner. There's a picture of a nude photo of Yul Brynner that was circulated widely throughout Hollywood in the 50s. And there's many stories about Yul back then. He had an affair with Nancy Davis, who later became Nancy Reagan. He had a long affair with her. Nancy Davis was reputed to have kept this nude photo of Yul Brynner in her private records as a keepsake. It was given with love, and love you, Nancy, great affair. Oh, here's me nude. Yeah, I'd keep it too. So my point is, are we too phallic, according to my friend Mike? And as well, that's all that's left, honey. All the normal scandals have been talked about, and people couldn't talk about the gay stuff before, so we're talking about it. Might I say, before it dies forever.